history is the 55th anniversary of Dr. King's assassinations. To this day, Dr. King remains widely regarded as one of the greatest non-violent leaders in history.
The Black History Celebration Committee, along with my co-chairs, Jan Duplain, and LaTanya Kyler is also one of our co-chairs of the committee on the embassies. So that is wonderful. And, I wanted to let you know, since I came here 10 years ago to work for my church, I learned a lot about Black history, especially through Dr. Frank Smith and Chuck Hicks. And I really learned that there's so much Black history. There is so much to it, and so much that we're documenting and learning again now, and newly or for the first time. And it's so important to know that Black history is everyone's history. It's American history, it's world history. It is Black history, but it's everybody's history. And I feel so strongly about that.
The idea that I had about, we started off doing Reading Dr. King after his assassination, because I thought that it becomes important to celebrate his birthday, but it's just as important to remember why he was killed, what he stood for. And so we started this project called Reading Dr. King. And we started reading Dr. King in D.C. And since this is the 55th year of his assassination, we thought it was important that we not only do Reading Dr. King in D.C., but Reading Dr. King in America and Reading Dr. King around the world. But I like this particular excerpt that I'm reading because I think it talks about what we as individuals can do. And Dr. King had a wonderful way in his speeches, of making things visible. He made you see things. He made you feel things. And so I am reading some excerpts from the drum major speech. And every now and then, I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral. What is it that I would want them to say? If you're around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a funeral long. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, every now and then I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King tried to live his life to serve others. I'd like for somebody to say on that day that Martin Luther King tried to love somebody. I want you to say on that day that I tried to be right on the question of the war.
And I told him I had moved to Washington, D.C., and I had hung up my marching shoes. Now, probably if I had this do all over again, I probably would have thought of something more erudite if I had known this was going to be my last conversation with him. But I didn't know I was going to see him. I had no idea I was going to bump into him in the airport there in Memphis. But he did say to me that he said, don't ever hang up your marching shoes. And those are his words that I want to leave to you today, from his mouth to your ears. Don't ever hang up your marching shoes. As long as there are people being denied the right to vote in this country and in your country, don't hang up your marching shoes. As long as women's reproductive rights are being taken away from them in a country where they've been promised for us years, generations, don't hang up your marching shoes. As long as their kids go into bed hungry in a country as rich as this country is, in a world with all the natural resources that we have, as long as there's a need like that, don't hang up your marching shoes. And finally, as long as the people of the District of Columbia don't have the right to vote for a president, for a governor, don't have the right to vote for a senator, don't have the right to vote in a Congress that sets the taxes and that passes the laws about whether we go into war or not, as long as we don't have full citizenship, don't ever hang up your marching shoes. Thank you.
Dr. King believed that human rights are interconnected and that every violation of human rights is a threat to the overall fabric of justice and equality in society. The King Center states, during the less than 13 years of Dr. King's leadership of the modern American civil rights movement, from December 1955 until April 4th, 1968, African Americans achieved more genuine progress toward racial equality in America than the previous 350 years had produced.
So you don't have to wait for governments, for the UN, for UNICEF, for any other person in your life to do something that you could do. And I know I speak to many of you here who are already doing that. That's what Martin Luther King did. It's enough to have one person who believes in change, who believes that something can be done about it. And we don't have to wait for others. So whoever tells me that I cannot help 258 million children in this world to impact them and help them get the education they deserve, you are wrong. Because I've been dedicated my entire life, every second of my life, to help others. I built a wonderful team around the world who now I'm teaching and empowering them to teach other people, right?
This was not an easy, organized event, so we have had a lot of players here today, and each one of you are spectacular. I mean, it really is amazing. And, right, I'm so impressed by this group. And you know what I'm even more impressed? You say 3 to 4 minutes, and of course, sometimes we go a little bit over that. Everybody has stayed right online, so I know that Martin Luther King would be very proud of everybody today, so thank you. And I just want to say one quick thing about the people that are in the audience, Sheila, and I know this is from, all the work that you've been doing, reaching out, and I see so many different countries and ambassadors, Nicaragua, hello, ambassador, and I see the Burkina Faso team here, and I see Costa Rica ambassador. Just stand up and acknowledge you. And we have Guyana, the ambassador from Guyana back there, and the Republic of Congo, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is here. Fantastic. Saudi Arabia is here, and Sudan, and on it goes. So I know and Cote d'Ivoire. Did I mention Cote d'Ivoire? Yes, our ambassador, and yes. And so thank you for all of you being here today.
Justice is really important, but he never stopped at justice. Justice only satisfies the need to bring consequences to the offender. It doesn't make the offender now a friend of the offended. My job is to figure out, how can I make my adversaries my advocates? How can I make my enemies my friends? This is where healing happens, not just justice. When justice happens, it's better than none, but it still doesn't make the offended whole, and it doesn't necessarily fix whatever went wrong. Reconciliation does, and that's where I live. Black and white folk loving one another, not just tolerating one another, doing more than just window dressing on a Sunday morning, but really delving into relationships whereby we're talking about issues that are prickly, not comfortable, but coming out better because somebody's experience is now valued, somebody else's life.
But I want to address the thread that is woven through all the remarks that have been made today. I loved, don't take off your marching shoes, for sure. That was wonderful. And the need for reconciliation, not just move on, but reconciliation. I feel it's so important. So I just have a comment. Oppressors throughout history and even today target critical areas of human dignity. by eroding powerful aspects of man's fundamental humanity. Self-determination, freedom of expression and self-identity, education as a path toward civic engagement and opportunity, and finally, the very right to exist. This struggle is going on today, here, in Ukraine and elsewhere. The defenseless have no power. Martin Luther King viewed oppression through a global lens. And that's something that I don't think the mainstream American public is truly aware of. He was a champion of human dignity for every human being on the face of the earth, because that is what he was addressing from his own being.
That new flag going up is the symbol of a new age coming into being. I could hear people shouting all over the vast audience. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Before I knew it, I started weeping. I was crying for joy. And I knew about all of the struggles, all of the pain, and all of the agony that these people had gone through for this moment. It reminds me also of my independence of my country in 1980. He goes on to say, and I could hear that old Negro spiritual once more crying out, free at last. Great God Almighty, I'm free at last. They were experiencing that their souls. They were experiencing that in their soul, in their very souls. It was coming in. And everywhere we turned, we could hear it ringing out from the housetops. We could hear it from every corner, every nook and crook of the community. Freedom, freedom. This was the breaking loose from Egypt. From Egypt, I thought that in this event, the birth of this nation, new nation, would give impetus to oppressed peoples all over the world. That was the feeling. Yes. I thought it would have worldwide implications and repercussions, not only for Asia and Africa, but also for America.
We all know about Dr. King's role in domestic civil rights, but less is known of his efforts to organize around international affairs. And this afternoon, with over 10 embassies and more nationalities present this morning, we commemorate Dr. King's efforts as an international leader. This morning, we have honored Dr. King's deep respect and understanding of international cooperation. I will end with Dr. King's quote, "Whatever we do should be done in a spirit of international brotherhood and not national selfishness." Thank you for joining us, and it was an honor to have you at the Bern Auditorium.
A special request of Chuck Hicks.
Oh.
A few years ago, when I coordinated the Martin Luther King event for the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington, you stood up at the mic and you told a very powerful story of how people together who were working with Martin Luther King would stand together, and they held hands in a particular way. Do you remember that, Chuck? Do you think maybe you could stand up and show us and tell us what happened, and maybe invite all of us to be able to sing that song together? Someday, for deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
Thank you.
Is there any other
Perfect
questions?
way to end.
Other
And with
questions?
that, we'll wrap it up if that's okay with you. I can't imagine a question after that. Anyway, we love all of you. We're so grateful to have you here. And God bless the State Department, Sheila, and Celine, and all the work that you do for AAFSW. Thank you.
And I too would like to thank you, and I'll be here for a few minutes if you have a question.